Welcome back to another UNC basketball recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you are watching us on our YouTube channel, that is Tar Heel Illustrated. I am THI, publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our director of basketball recruiting, longtime AAU college and high school coach, and a damn good player personnel scout, Mr. David Sisk. And David, this is a big day for Carolina basketball. Anytime a kid commits, it's a big day for UNC, and Hubert Davis has reeled in the fourth member of the class of 2022, Tyler Nickel, a 6'6" wing from Elkton, Virginia. He attends East Rockingham High School. 1,902 points in his high school career. He is 899 off the pace of Mac McClung as the all-time leading scorer in the very talent-rich state of Virginia. We'll get into some other numbers a little bit later, David, but your thoughts on Tyler Nickel popping for Carolina?
And 1,900 points more than we had in our high school career.
Yeah, maybe 1,850 for me.
So Tyler, obviously, we talked about it before we went on the show. Hubert got the guy that he targeted. You know, you had some inside intelligence and information that they had really put the press on him, full court press on him this week when he came in for the visit. I talked to Jamie Shaw today, and I asked Jamie, I said, how did they flip him? Because he was, I'm not going to say totally 100% solid on North Carolina, but there were
Virginia Tech.
Or for Virginia Tech rather, but there were two future casts on Arrivals Network for Virginia Tech. And if you take some of the other recruiting companies, every prediction out there nationally had been Virginia Tech. There were like 4 or 5. Now you see a lot of these players, there may be as many as 10 or 12. So there wasn't, in quantity, there wasn't a huge number. But they were all trending toward Virginia Tech. And I had spoken, as you know, with Tim Sullivan at the Virginia Tech site, and the coaches felt very good about it after that visit, which was the weekend before he went to Chapel Hill. Jamie Shaw had taken Virginia Tech. He's got a lot of sources within the ACC. He lives in the Carolinas. So, you know, there was a lot of feeling that way. And Jamie's words to me was it was the Carolina Magic, you know, and we had talked about, if you'll remember, back in the spring, back in the winter, when they were recruiting these players and Roy Williams was the head coach at North Carolina, if they could get them on campus for official visits, that was always a huge feather in Carolina's cap, because they can really sell what they have on an official visit. And that appears to be what happened here. Is North Carolina, Hubert Davis, they really sold what the University of North Carolina has to offer. And I've got to give Hubert Davis credit here, because this was not a kid all along that said my dream was to go to North Carolina. They basically took a kid who appeared to be a pretty solid lean to Virginia Tech and flipped him on the official visit, and now he's a North Carolina Tar Heel.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated at what kids say when you talk to them after they get the offer, because they want to talk about the offer itself. And he didn't go all dream school, all national championship school, boy, you know, Jordan Brand or anything like that. He talked about what they were prioritizing him as, what they thought of him as a player. So clearly he's looking at this as a basketball fit thing on a very high level. It's not just, boy, I just want to be a Tar Heel. And then when you see how they prioritized him this past weekend for his official visit, that was impressive. That told me that, okay, whatever other options that are out there, and we'll get into that here in a second, they wanted him. They made him understand that we don't want you because we didn't get other guys. We want you because we want you. We need a shooter. We need a 6'6" shooter. We love your game. We think you're a perfect fit here. And when you've got Roy talking to him a lot, and you've got Hubert talking to him with his parents, and you got Kobe White kind of rolling around with him and stuff like that, right out there before the football game, to me, you're telling a kid, yeah, we absolutely want you to be in this program. And they got it done, David. They whatever button or whatever hook they needed to get in there, they were able to do it. And that's very impressive. That shows Hubert, before he got guys right away, like Will Shaver, got him right away. He wanted to be there. He had to work a little differently, a little different angle for this. Had to use the program angle a little more, and it worked. I think that's impressive.
When I started with a rival site, my first job, I was interning with Memphis, kind of learning the trade. Then I went to the Vanderbilt site. I was working with Vanderbilt in Minnesota, and there weren't a lot of 5-star type kids. There were 3-star types, and Darius Garland was one of the first ones. And here's the reason I bring that up. When I interviewed Darius, and you'd ask every kid, well, what is it that you like? What are you looking for? And his answer was player development, how they're going to use me, how they're going to prepare me for the pros. Now, Tyler Nichols not talked a whole lot about the pros, but he's not talking either about, well, boy, I like the way the campus looks, and they've got pretty girls, and they've got, man, I can't wait to play in the Dean Dome. And you don't even hear a lot of these kids to even talk about national championships. When you interview the 5-star kids, the top kids, they're talking about how they're going to be used, how they're going to be developed, and they're already thinking about their future. They're not thinking about the college deal. Tyler Nickel seemed to me like he was approaching this, even though he doesn't quite have that ranking, like a 5-star, top 15, top 20 kid. That was the way he was approaching and what he was looking for and the way he was approaching it. And North Carolina has been pretty adamant since day one in recruiting him how they're going to use him. He's a shooter, has a reputation. And you already talked about what he's accomplished in Virginia high school, that he's a shooter, he can score, and, that's what they wanted. And, that's what Coach Davis obviously is looking for, in recruits. So they were able to paint that picture of how they were going to use him, and it worked.
Either your dog is really excited about Tyler Nickel being a Tar Heel, or your house is under attack right now. He averaged 33.7 points a game last year in high school, 10.1 rebounds, 3.7 assists. So he does pass the ball 51% from the field and 43% from three-point range. And I say that he does pass the ball because he plays in, I'm from Virginia. I think East Rockingham's a single A school or a low 2A school. And a lot of times guys that are racking up the numbers don't really pass a whole lot. So there is an element of that in his game. You have seen him in person here recently. You were out on the circuit there for a while, and I guess late June, and you got a chance to see him in person and talk to him and all that kind of good stuff. What are some of the things that you liked about his game that you saw?
Well, he's physical. He's got a good body, good frame. He looks like a basketball player. And I think from an athletic standpoint, people don't need they'll get a stereotype about him and think that he's going to be maybe an unathletic kid, and they hear shooter and they think he's just going to stand out there and be catch and shoot. I think athletically he belongs in the ACC. I think he moves well. I like his frame. What I saw in the summer, and my critique on him was based on obviously 2 or 3 days. And let me say this, if you watch a kid for 2 or 3 days, it's not necessarily fair to the kid if you make that, and that's the only time I've seen him live, that you take a whole body of work into that. Unfortunately, there's not a huge sample size. So one thing we were looking for in his strength is the outside shot, is scoring. That's what he's noted for. So that was what we looked at and kind of looked for. And, his shooting percentage wasn't high. He struggled putting the ball in the bucket a little bit. And so the question is, and you got to remember this too, before I get to the question, let me give you a hypothetical here. If he would have shot the ball well that day, I would have left saying, he's the greatest thing since Mac McClung, in the state of Virginia. So you've got to take that into context. But obviously he can score the ball. He did that in high school. So the thing I think that a lot of people are looking for, and I think it's a fair critique, and this is what I stand on, is what is seeing that he can do that consistently against the upper tier athletes that you see on the Adidas circuit. And most of these kids are ACC type players. And he may very well be able to do that. You know, I've gave my critique before, and let me say this: Hubert Davis thinks he can, and that's all that matters. So if Hubert Davis thinks he can, I'm going along with that. I've said it before on here. It was like Rick Barnes said before. Somebody asked him about rankings, and he said the only top 150 that I trust is Rick Barnes' top 150. I heard him say that. So, you know, let's think about it. If Hubert Davis decided tomorrow he didn't want to coach basketball anymore and he wanted to do rankings, you know, every recruiting company in the United States would be beating his door down to get Chapel Hill to make him an offer. You know,
and Tyler Nickel,
you'd have first dibs. You don't live that far from him. So,
yeah, there you go.
But here's what I'm saying. Obviously, he knows what he wants. He's looking for that. So, you know, I think it goes to say that Coach Davis supersedes his opinion, supersedes everybody else, and he likes like I said, what he sees in Tyler Nickel.
Yeah, he's rated number 134 in Rivals, I believe. Number 134 in Rivals. Some of the other services have him in the top 90, top 85.
Well, top 85, top 90.
Yeah. And you know what? And based on what they did, and this is what impresses me. This is why, you know, the rankings are there. I get it. I think they're important, but I also think they're not important because in the end, and we do this with football all the time, you know, if a kid passes muster, the vetting process that Mac Brown's program has, then there's no reason why I would ever second guess that. It wouldn't make any sense. I think you could say the same thing about Carolina basketball, especially now. I think adding people like Pat Sullivan to the staff, guys who've been away from the college game, look at players maybe through a different lens, is helping their vetting process, help them evaluate kids. And if they thought enough of him to do what they did this weekend, to go full throttle after him when Cam Whitmore's out there, I think that this tells Carolina fans everything they need to know. If Hubert did come out with a recruiting service tomorrow, Tyler Nickel would be a lot higher than he is even in the other services. And I think that's all people really should know. And that's all that really matters.
Here's the thing. It's all, there's no absolute to anybody. It doesn't matter if they're at East Rockingham in Virginia or they're at, I don't know, De La Salle in Los Angeles or Sierra Canyon.
Yeah.
They have to prove it on the court. And the reason I say that, I think you can take it whether it's in a rural setting where the competition may not be as strong, or if it's in an urban setting where it's at its best, or if you're playing at Montverde or you're playing at one of these basketball factories that plays a national schedule. It's up to you to prove yourself. And for every player that's made it, there's been a player that's not, and vice versa. So if you look at real kids, I know that, I mean, the other player that we've talked about in that comparison is Matt McClung.
Yeah.
You know, and Matt McClung was at a small school just in Southwest Virginia, and Gate City, I think it was, and he ended up doing he's had a great career. Yeah. You know, and I think any program would love to have him. The district that I'm in and I'm at, I can speak from experience on this because I'm at the school that I'm at's got about 300 kids. And everybody else in our district's about the same. And one player that came out of that district was Kirk Haston, that played for Indiana and was drafted by Charlotte in the first round. Borderline lottery pick. So, obviously there's players can come out of there and do just fine. So it's up to each one on an individual basis.
Well, we're going to talk more about the class of 22 and what might come down the pike in another podcast. We'll go ahead and wrap things up here on this. But I do think, a lot of Carolina fans, a lot of people on our boards for years have been saying they want to get that mid-size wing shooter. Yeah. Got to get the kind of kid that hurts them in a non-conference game or an NCAA tournament. Well, Tyler Nickel fits the suit.
Yeah, and one thing as well, Coach Davis is doing right now, if you look at what he's done, he's addressed almost each position. Yeah. And I look at Nickel, and in a positionless game, Nickel could probably play some two. So, you're looking at a wing. He's more of a 2-3, and now they're looking for versatility.
Yeah.
So, is there really a difference in a 2 and a 3?
No.
You know what I'm saying? So, they've got a wing They've got a point guard in Trimble. And if you kind of look, and I know we're going to get into this later, Trimble is just evidently an otherworldly athlete who is not the greatest shooter. So you kind of complement that with a kid who has the reputation as a shooter in nickel. So they could, really combine and join very well, what they need to do with a point guard, an athlete who can draw the defense, get it to the shooter. Then you've got Jalen Washington at the 4, and then you've got Will Shaver at the 5. So you've got, you've pretty well addressed every position with these 4.
Nickel, Washington, Shaver, and Trimble. Those are your 4 in the books. Class of 22 for North Carolina. We'll come back here in a couple of days and do something talking about the class. What else might Hubert and his staff do, and what other factors would impact what they do over the next several months? These 4 kids are all going to sign in November. So they got 4 in the books. Right now, they're not waiting for anybody else. So as it is, I think Hubert's pretty happy, pretty satisfied that he's got a solid class. He's got guys that could do things that Hubert likes. And like I said, folks, they put on an amazing full court press to get this kid flipped this weekend. And I think the bigger story than getting Tyler Nickel to me is Hubert has used different approaches to get these 4 kids, and he's been successful. So a lot of people doubted whether or not he had had it in him to be a great recruiter, because there weren't a whole lot of stories about him recruiting before Roy retired. Well, I think he's proven in the last several months that he can get in there, he can get in the game, and he can win some battles.
And I'm going to say this. And like you said, they put the press on Tyler Nickel. That was a player that he wanted. And we can't overemphasize that enough. That was what he wanted. Now, if you go to the summer, and I made no bones about it, I really liked Isaac Trout. Now, not for Tyler Nickel's spot, but Isaac Trout was, could play that 3, that 4, and he was a player I liked. And I think they went more with Jalen Washington than they did Trout. So that was kind of that comparison.
Yeah.
But here's the thing I noticed. When I was there the first day in Georgia, in Atlanta, when the coaches could get out, and they were there at the Under Armour tournament in Atlanta. They were there almost every game for Isaac Trout. And I really liked him. But as the games went and the month progressed, I talked to Isaac later, and he said, they didn't come and see me the last couple of events. I didn't see them. So there was less and less interest there. That interest never waned with Tyler Nickel.
Yeah.
They were there all the way through July to see him. And when I saw him, Sean May and Hubert Davis were there in Birmingham to see him. Hubert was there, I think, every day. So they obviously, this was somebody that they had their sights set on, and they never took the foot off the gas.
And they got him. Tyler Nickel, the most recent basketball commit, University of North Carolina class of 2022, 4 in. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think they're going to be hitting 23 hard this winter, David, and we'll hit that in another podcast coming up as well. He's David Sisk. I'm Andrew Jones. Thanks for stopping by.